right, guys. So, welcome to the Right Balance Show. This is our third episode, and we are joined here with Kevin McGrath from Meibel, and we are super excited to have a nice conversation with him. So, Kevin, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you. And Alex, whenever you're ready, please drive us through.
All right, cool. So, Kevin, welcome. Excited to have you here. The first question that I want us to kick it off with, which is the most important question in the world. Could you tell us a little bit more about that piece of technology that is on the, I guess, right side over there? Yeah, what is that thing?
That is a boombox, a working boombox, mind you, and it's actually a boombox that I used at my wedding. I'm not that old, but my wife's a big John Cusack fan, so if anybody knows the movie Say Anything, where he's holding the boombox above his head, we did a little intro to the reception hall with me holding the boombox and then her eventually coming in to our first dance. So it sits on the shelf as a memory of that. But I did grow up as a kid. I had boomboxes as a kid. So the gray hairs definitely go back to the 80s and early 90s. So
I see. So does it have AI, that boombox?
no, there is no AI. You completely get away. You can throw an old like Metallica tape in there and just kind of sit outside and blast it. So
yeah, the
Awesome.
tapes. I remember where computers were basically reading off the tapes only. Although what's interesting is that we also our second episode is with Nelson Nahum. So he is the CEO of another company, Geyser Data, which is tape as a service for basically for storage. So tape is in the game still.
It's still in the game. Iron Mountain's still probably driving tapes from data center backups to secure facilities. I think they're still making some good money on that. Cloud's eating into the business for sure. I think object storage is eating at that industry a lot. But I actually wrote very early in my career. I wrote Perl scripts that actually automated the backup process with our tape libraries in the data centers. So big VLT tape libraries and stuff like that. So yeah, no, I'm very familiar with tapes and how much you cross your fingers when you recall to store them that they will actually work again.
yeah, that's a problem with the tapes. Well, so it's a good kick off the conversation. So I guess let's start with why technology altogether. So you mentioned that you already started playing with some tech early on, and I guess did that what brought you to tech, or how did you arrive at that to be your career?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I'm one of those people who's just kind of drawn to tech at an early age, right? I know when I was a kid, I was always fascinated with technology and electronics. As a young kid, I wanted to know how my parents' phone worked, so I just took it apart one night.
No, nice.
I don't think they were too happy with that, but I was just really interested with like how does a phone work? Like how do you get sound out of the thing? And I remember, it's the old school phones that you actually had to hang up with the receiver and everything like that. So I wanted to see what all the wires did. And when you took a wire out, what stopped working and what didn't. And that's kind of, I guess, my earliest memory of tinkering with technology and maybe also pissing off my parents. At the same, I got the phone back together, by the way. They're not complicated beasts. Actually, they used to not be complicated beasts, right? And then on top of that, I got really into some stuff. I happened to meet a couple friends, late elementary school, early middle school, who were actually as much into technology or more than me. And so I wanted to start using a modem and I wanted to start figuring out how to build a computer and, all those things. So I was, back, even before the 386, right? Like 386 first computer I built, but before that I was using, an Apple IIe, different things like that. Wherever I could find a computer, I wanted to get my hands on it. And then in middle school, I convinced my dad to buy me a modem, which was kind of a big moment. Like I had to beg and plead or from my side as a kid, I had to beg and plead, right? He finally took me to the store and he saw how much it cost. And I could tell he was like, are you really sure you want this thing? And I can still remember the ring of a 2400 baud modem, right? And that 2400 baud modem is really what made it click for me because Now the people I knew, we could like call each other, right? And like we could share the amazing technology things that we were doing with each other. And I just remember that modem really changing the game for me, from like tinkering with stuff to really thinking about like how technology is going to change the world. And then I started running like my own BBS at one point in time. If anybody remembers what those things are, before we had the internet, we called each other and we staged these bulletin board systems that you could post notes back to each other and play games and, all kinds of stuff. So I ran BBSs. I took up my family's phone line. I forced them to buy a second phone line at one point in time. And, and then after that, in high school, I actually started a small company with a few of my friends called BackNet at the time. I keep that email address to today. But yeah, the whole evolution. I have parents who, understood. They still don't understand technology today, but they understood a passion that a young kid had about it, and they were willing to kind of foster that along. I still don't think they can tell you what I do today, but they've been very supportive of me over the years. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, my mom also keeps asking me, is like, well, what is that you actually do? Could you explain? And I'm like, there's the internet, and the internet is just computers connected to each other. No bueno. It's just again, we keep on having the same combo. So I also have a funny story. Back in the day, my parents put me into a new school, and then second or third day later, they basically called parents to the director about me, and they're like, "Oh my God, something happened." So I was curious how the bell in the school works. So I put it apart in the school. So I was like, "What is that thing? How does it work?" So it's a similar thing, but in the school though. Yeah, it was a thing. Okay, so basically now. Early passion led you to starting your own company with friends. So could you tell us a little bit more how that led you to the individual contributor path altogether, and how you transitioned from the IC into your first managerial roles?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, in high school, we did start our own company. It was me and two other friends, Brad, Alex, and Kevin, which is why it was called BackNet. Really, inventive. We took the first letter of each of our names and threw it into a domain name. And we built web pages for local area businesses, and we hosted them. At one point in time, I had about 4 or 5 servers running in my parents' basement, and I had diverted the air conditioning to run over the servers, and I had like the covers off of them, and they were blowing because in the summertime, it wasn't always cold enough in the parents' basement. I got like an ISDN line running down there and things like that. When I went to college, I ran it for like another year, but I kind of wanted to do the college life, and it wasn't a business. It wasn't like a startup. Like it wasn't going, to millions of dollars or anything like that. Like it was fun to run, but I also wanted to have like an actual college career. So we transferred those customers over to a different local area business. And, I did the college thing. After about a year, I realized that I wanted to get back to like doing work again. So I stayed in college, but I started working for a startup at the time. It was called USI, or US Internetworking, which was one of the first application service providers, which is what we called it before SaaS, by the way. And SaaS technically today is a little different than what we were doing. We would run big applications like Ariba, PeopleSoft, different packaged applications, and we'd run them as a service. So we weren't necessarily creating our own services, but we created a service that would run other traditionally kind of installed applications, right? But we would sell them to customers as a service. And that was a great place to get into. And it was I was in during like the tech boom. You're talking about the late 90s, early 2000s, before the bust. And the amount of technology I got to be around. I got to rack the servers. I got to run the lines. I got to write the code that helped run the system, like literally do everything. Everything from picking up the floor to, going back to a computer and automating how we did installs and how we managed the data center and everything like that. So that was a very cool job to be in. I stayed in that job for a very long time and just kept working my way up the ladder, so to speak. And it was just great seeing how technology fit together from every single aspect, from the hardware to the programmer's fingertips. I eventually moved a little bit away from the hardware side, and I moved over to the cloud side and the developer side. That's the side that interests me the most. Mostly, around operations. How do you run large scale operations and large scale infrastructure, and how do you use code to make that possible? And then, that role led me into my role at SunGuard Availability Services, where I worked for the CTO there, and then eventually into the CTO role at Spot by NetApp.
You mentioned before that at SunGuard, that's where you started getting more into the operational side of things, into the business side of things,
Correct.
as opposed to pure technology side of things. So every technology leader at some point gets into that kind of like a place where they transition from something that they know very deeply, their kind of core expertise in tech, all everything related to it, all the way down to more of a tech operations, which is like, okay, now we have a team. How do we get that team doing tickets and things? Into the step 3, which is, okay, so now we have a team. How do we build business around it? So you did it in the early days with your entrepreneurial adventures, but in around the SunGuard and the Spot by NetApp, you also started getting into the business side of things. So would you mind telling us a little bit more about that transition, and what are the challenges that you faced when you transitioned into that realm?
Yeah, I think that's the big transition point, like in a career, I think, of like what you want to do as an engineer and a technologist, right? And even though I had done kind of a much smaller business in high school, I kind of had the, I had the thirst for it early on, but the next more than decade of my career was being an engineer, right? It was being a technologist. And then when I got to SunGuard, I had to start learning about how the rest of the business worked. Josh Crow, the CTO I was working for there, was trying to modernize a business that had been around for a while, get them into the cloud, get them to do new things. And I had to learn, not only is the technology cool, but why is it good for the business, and how does the business operate, and what are the KPIs of the other units of the business? And it's very different. What motivates a sales, especially in a large company, like what motivates a salesperson? Why is it important to have a repeatable marketing campaign and sales battle cards? And you can't just take little new things and add them into a big business and expect them to take hold without really putting yourself in the shoes of other people in the business. And, how do you make money? How do you do transactions? How do you do quote to cash, right? Like all these things go in that you don't necessarily have to think about all the time when you're just down into the technology, right? And you got to kind of like that. My degree from college is actually in economics. Econ and finance has always been kind of a second passion of mine. And I actually got my degree in economics while I was doing all this technology and comp sci work on the side. So I've always kind of had this feeling that I've wanted to do more than technology. And you've got to want that. I will say that. And I think I do. And I don't think it's a good thing or a bad thing whether you do or don't. I think just being self-aware about what you want, because when you do make that jump, you start doing less technology. As much as you want to code, you'll never code as much as you did before. And eventually you're going to get to a few weeks where you realize, maybe I haven't written a line of code. And you have to, does my, do I want to go back to solving problems with my, with engineering, or do I want to solve problems at a business level, which is much different? And unfortunately, at a business level, depending on what company you're at, that could mean Word documents and PowerPoints and other things to get your point across in how you're thinking, which is very, very different than engineering. But I will say my engineering background and kind of my wantingness to get into the business side has helped very well, because being able to bridge those two worlds together, I think in the second half of my career has made me very, very successful, being able to bridge those things together. And that's how I kind of see myself now. I kind of still identify as an engineer, but I'm not, right? I'm not an engineer today. And taking that jump, it's a big jump. You have to retrain yourself how to think. You have to retrain yourself how you're going to go about your work the next day. And you have to put yourself, you have to empathize with the new people that you're working with, and what's going to motivate them, and how are you going to help them understand where to go to and how to guide them. And it's very different. It's just very different.
What do you like more about being now on the business side of things versus what do you miss from being purely on the engineering side of things?
Yeah, I think it's good. I like things from both aspects, right? Like the biggest thing I like outside of the engineering roles, I really enjoy seeing how all the parts of what makes a good, healthy business come together and work correctly, and being an enabler of that, right? Like helping people in different disciplines come together for a common goal and kind of make that happen, and being the person that's responsible for that is very exciting to me, and I really, really enjoy that. To be honest with you, I do miss kind of late nights coding. Like, you know, when I first met my wife, there were definitely mornings where we would wake up and she's like, did you go to bed last night? Did you?
Yeah.
And I'd be out, you know, hacking away on something that I just had to get done. I remember coding especially being so addictive to me that I couldn't leave my monitor until I had figured out the problem or the task. Or even if I figured it out, like I didn't figure it out in the right way, right? Like, oh, I figured it out, but I hacked it together. Now I have to put it together in like the elegant way to like push it out. Like that was very, very addictive to me as an engineer. I don't get that same rush putting together a presentation on the business side. Like I do it, and I'm not saying like I don't like it. It's not binary. It's not one or zero. But I don't get that same rush I used to get at like solving a really complex engineering problem and just sticking at it until it was done. Right.
Interesting. Okay, so the intensity of excitement was higher in a technology type of days, but I guess the satisfaction of getting something bigger done that sits on top of technology is what the former doesn't have. It's like individually you were very excited to go and code all night, but you know, that coding alone is basically that energy is contained within you. But whereas then now you enjoy more having other people succeed. Well, I guess you enjoy that more now. That
I guess I enjoy them. I think what's different is when you finally figure it out as an engineer, it clicks instantly. Like you run that code and like either the test suite passes or your test case, like whatever it is you're working on, like when it works, it's like there's an aha moment. You're sitting in front of your monitor and those like glowing letters are looking back at you and you're like, I did it. And in the business sense, like you can work all night still and wake up in the morning and you can be done. And it's like you don't know the success of that for a while, right? Like you don't know the success of that for maybe months down the line if that's going to work or when you present it or how it works. So I think coding and engineering kind of give you this instant feel good gratitude when you win. Whereas on the business side, it's kind of a longer term, you know, or a longer run until you really feel the success of your labor, right? It's still good when you feel it. It's just I do like I don't think I've matched, you know, I don't think I've matched that on the business side yet. Not to say you could have another person on here who goes, oh yeah, no, you know, I'm the exact opposite. But for me personally, coming up through, you know, all those years of engineering, I think that's what I lack on the other side. Not that I still get a lot of gratitude. Don't get me wrong. I still like doing all those other things, but yeah, I just kind of miss that gratification of staying up all night working on something and then getting that instant feedback at like 4:30 in the morning that you did it, right?
Yeah. Now let's talk about the learnings of the disciplines and I guess areas of the business that technology leaders don't necessarily have when they make a jump into the business. So could you speak a little bit more about how things like sales, marketing, you know, product, well, product although is adjacent to engineering, lots of people get into that first, but how is, let's say, sales and marketing are different from engineering, and what help you to really grasp enough of those areas to then jump into the CEO position?
Yeah, absolutely. I think sales is probably the hardest for someone coming from a pure technology phase to understand. I think product is probably your next most natural jump, and I do think people can move back and forth between product and engineering roles. I'm not saying that it's natural, but I think those two roles are much closer together. And I think product is actually, if you're in a super technical role, I think moving from that super technical role to a product role is a good introduction for you into the rest of the business that you may not be getting, you know, as an engineer, right? Because product needs to start thinking not that you're not thinking about the customer when you're an engineer, but you need to start interfacing with the customer, and you need to start interfacing with other parts of the business in a way that you don't as a pure engineer. Now, there is a much bigger step from there, I will say, to marketing and sales, and I will say especially to sales. And the incentives are different, right? The incentives are different. How you go about your job is different. How about your day is different. You go from like this very kind of tactical way, how you're going to approach something in your mind as an engineer, to a salesperson who's basing, a lot of their job and their career on the relationships that they build, and how they build a relationship with a person, and how they excite someone around a value and a business need. Now, I'm not saying that's not tactical. There are very good salespeople where that's a tactical thought process, but it is a different process. And I think product and engineering people get very kind of dismayed when it's not, when a salesperson comes to them and the product is not the first thing that they tell them is going to drive this deal forward. It's their relationship building. There's this divide that happens, and like the product and engineering people just can't see how, well, just put the product in front of them and it'll sell or not. And the salesperson's like, no, it's way more than that. Believe me, like I got to build trust. I got to show them value. I got to show them how to get there. And I think for me to actually learn that process took me really empathizing and really listening to a lot of the salespeople I was working with over years. And I'm still not going to tell you, like, I obviously run sales at the startup that I'm at because I have to. Eventually, I hope to hire a sales team, and I hope to hire a sales leader that's better than me. But you have to empathize, and you have to really take yourself out of your position and go, this is a different discipline. This is a different art, right? And you need to understand that art, and you need to understand it's not as, it's not as binary. There's a lot of gray area, right? There's a lot of gray area in what you're doing. And the people are incentivized different, working on compensation or working on quotas and comp. It's completely different than working on salary, right? And how you incentivize a team, especially when you get higher and higher up and you have to run a sales team, you need to learn that the incentives that you put out there drive behavior, drive culture, drive everything, down to like how they get paid, which is very different on the product side. You're still driving culture and you're still driving incentives, but it's a very nuanced, different way on how you run those teams, and how those people are making their money. And on sales side, it's a lot about making money and how you incentivize that. And it's a good thing, right? And the people who are very good at it do a very good job, and I've learned a lot from them. And you have to be willing to learn a lot, and you have to be able to throw your kind of previous misconceptions away about, maybe how a product is sold, especially in the B2B world. I haven't built a lot of B2C products in my lifetime, so it might be a little different there, but B2B and especially enterprise sales, that's a very special game, and you got to listen to people who know how to do it well, right?
I like how you also described the kind of like high level. You're definitely right in terms of it's not just putting the product in front of people and seeing if they're going to buy it. There's actually a whole concept around it, similar how in engineering systems we think about more of the main business model, where you have, like in e-commerce, you have a cart, a user, and stuff like that. In sales, there is a thing like rapport. You need to show value. You need to then basically move people through the funnel. So with those things, that's sales. Now that you also run marketing, finance, HR. So what are the crash course of a technology leader into business? Like what is okay, so sales is rapport, value, pipeline. What is marketing? What is finance? How do you manage HR? Like those three.
From the top, you got to have some clear goals for the whole company, right? I do like setting OKRs. I like having objectives that come down from the top, and at least having everybody in the company saying like, hey, these are the 3 main objectives we're all going to. So I think one of the worst things you can have in a company, and when things start breaking down, is when different parts of the company see themselves as having different objectives than other companies. Now, I will say this is one of the parts at a startup, which is very nice, because you're so small, the objectives are known. And I think as you grow and grow and grow, it's extremely important to keep those objectives for the company in sync. And this is what like AWS Jeff Bezos is very famous for, very, very heavy on these are the principles at which we're going to do. Here's what's important to us. And having the rest of Amazon buy in on that. When you have these founder CEOs who still have that great vision like Jensen at NVIDIA, you get that kind of by nature. When you get into companies that are large, like USI got bought by AT&T, different things like that, I think it's harder to kind of keep those objectives in synergy across the group. So while you're not necessarily doing the same thing across every single department, if your objectives are aligned, at least when you get people from different departments, like you get marketing and sales, the last thing you want them is to get finger pointing at each other. At least you want the objectives to be aligned so they're going for the same objectives, right? So it's super important to have clear objectives from the top. If you don't have that, none of your departments are going to work correctly. Everybody's going to set their own objectives and everyone's going to kind of default into what they know. And then when there is a conflict, you're not going to be able to resolve it, right? And that's the most important thing. Conflicts are going to come up all the time as your business grow, and you need to have a way that your conflicts are going to get resolved. And if you don't have clear objectives on what your company is doing and why, then you're not going to be able to resolve the conflict that comes up between marketing and sales, or product and marketing, or sales and the roadmap that they need to close the customer in the next 6 months, right? Now, to go a step, peel the layer back, you have different personas in each thing, right? Like, so salespeople, they're kind of their own group. Marketing is a different persona. You want them to be thinking outside the box on how to brand and push your product. And then you have, little nuances in there. Where do you put your product marketing group? Are they closer to product? Do they sit within the marketing realm? Are you going to do more brand marketing? Are you going to do more demand gen? You do have to do a crash course on all these things, and you got to get good leaders to make that happen. I think from a marketing perspective, you got to have a marketing leader and a sales leader that kind of get along, but also challenge each other. You don't want one of those leaders kind of overstepping the other. These are two groups that have to work together. One is generating the interest, the other is closing the pipe. There's always some tension, and I think there should be some natural tension between those groups at all times. And you have to be able to, again, set objectives as the leader to come in and resolve those issues as they come up. But marketing needs to drive sales, right? You're always going to have some issues between product and marketing, right? Product's always going to see kind of the features of their product as the best thing in the world, and then marketing is going to try and turn that into a story. So you need storytellers over there. And some of your best product managers might be able to do this naturally, but you're not always going to find that, right? And finding that synergy between the storytellers and the product teams is very important. And then, of course, your product and engineering groups always need to be in lock sync on what the roadmap is going forward. As far as finance, you want finance people who are supportive of the business. Part of that finance group also needs, when you get large enough, making sure that you're getting good financial decisions for the company. You want them to speak up when they see things in the budget that don't look correct, right? You don't always want to just be saying yes to everything to make things go fast, but you need people who are literally keeping, the balance book of the company in the best interest. So you want people who, and this is what's hard in a startup, you want people who move fast, but you also want people looking at the bottom line and making sure you're not like screwing up your gross margin somewhere or something like that. And then a lot of people forget about there's just good old operations. There's sales ops, there's biz ops, there's all these things as your company grows. And, they all kind of take a different, a little bit different way to think about the job, but they all need to have the same objectives. So sorry, that was kind of a long rambling answer.
No, it's great.
Into the different things that,
No, this is great. It's a literally crash course of technology leaders to about the whole business operations and high level setup. I definitely 100% agree in terms of setting up the common goals for everybody as the main thing. Another thing also worth mentioning is the culture, and what culture and organization is the common set of beliefs united by a common goal. So basically getting that in order will definitely help. And even technology leaders who are not in the shoes of operations just yet, I think it's definitely insightful for everybody to understand what type of ecosystem and environment they're actually living in, where there's marketing, sales, relationships, and how product to marketing and product to engineer, how it's all connected, and what type of incentives each group has. That definitely helps. So jumping into then, I guess the last question that we have is that, so on the path of a technology leader, obviously you walked it from here to where you're at now as a CEO. What are the things that helped you along the way through that journey that would be useful for other technology leaders?
I think personally, I don't know if it's just a technology leader, especially maybe where I came from, though, is, I talk about those late nights and staying up till 4 in the morning and stuff like that. Like, it very much had control over your own destiny, right? And sometimes as an engineer, especially in IC that stays in IC for a while, you need to realize that you can't do everything, and that it does take a team. And I think that's an easy thing to say and a hard thing to do, right? Realizing that you have to let go, right? So I think the first step when you move into management is you're not a manager because you can code better than everybody on your team, right? And in fact, those don't even make the best managers sometimes, right? Like, you're a manager because you're gonna make a group of people become better than what they were individually, right? And then as you get up, now you're making groups of people better because the groups of people are better than what they were. And then as a CEO, you're making like a whole business better, right? And I think so the hardest thing from moving kind of like an IC technical role where you have a good idea and you want to take that idea to market and you want to run is realizing that it is all about people at the end of the day, and how much can you help those people be successful. If you can't help the other people in your business be successful and everything has to run through you, I think there's probably maybe a limited handful number of people in the world who maybe operate like that, right? But for the rest of us, it's about making a group of people working together better than they are individually, right? And it becomes a people business. And I think one of the biggest things that I learned over the years, and I still continue to learn, is how to get people to work together in the best way possible to get our goals accomplished. Now, I still think about that in a very engineering way sometimes. Like, sometimes I'll sit down and I'll have a very object-oriented way, maybe that I put a thought pattern together, but don't show that. You need to take that and then turn it into a story that you're going to tell people and get people to kind of go behind. And then when you talk to people as a manager, you need to start understanding what a person's strengths and weaknesses are, and not necessarily even to change, not to change them, but to understand them and ensure people are in the right role, but not only in the right role, but that you're tasking them with things that they will be successful at. Right. And I think these are some of the harder personal things as you move from being an engineer to a manager, and then a manager to, running a business, is really understanding the people that work for you, understanding what drives them, understanding what they're good at, and making sure that you're leaning on the things that make them good. And that if they do want to work on the things that are weak, one, they're things that they want to work on. And two, they're things that they can get better at and will help them with their current job, right? And I think that first part is big, because sometimes, especially as managers and leaders, you say, oh, this person's weak in this, I'm going to help them with it. And it's like, that person may not want help in that area. And then you have other decisions that you need to talk about, right? Because the person has to want to get there. And I think a lot of people will bang their head on a wall sometimes, like, why can't I get a person to do X, Y, or Z? And it's like, that's not that person's strength point. I think that's a fault of management, not a fault of the person, right? And you kind of have to realize that as a manager. Now, sometimes things aren't going to work out, and you got to be an adult about that, and have those hard conversations sometimes. But I think in general, you hire someone for a reason. You understand their strengths and you try and play to them, right?
Yeah, crafting the right roles for the right people. that becomes very important. And also, as business grows, those roles change, and now things need to change. And what you said there is 100% true. Is that business is really a combination of people with different skill sets, different strengths and weaknesses, and they all come together, and the big thing happens. It's a whole art of it. Awesome. So that has been a very insightful conversation. I do share a lot of your passion for technology and the business as well, and I appreciate you also demonstrating that passion over here in this awesome conversation, sharing your insights, and helping other technology leaders to also succeed in their organizations, in their current technology positions, or when they evolve into business operations. So again, thank you for joining. Thank you for sharing your insights, and hopefully we are hoping to keep in touch and have you on the show again.
Yeah, that'd be great. And thank you for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you. And I enjoy these conversations. We're just kind of, helping people out there, right? I think it's a big decision, not to draw this out too much, but I see a lot of early stage technology engineers want to jump into a management role like instantly, or want to jump into a higher level role instantly. I do think one thing that really, really benefited me in my career was doing what I went through all the stages, right? I went through all the stages, and it really made me a better person for who I am today. I didn't skip any step along the way. I did the work over years. And I think there's something to be said for that. I think we have a really fast-paced industry now, and a lot of people want to move up the ranks really fast. But if I can distill anything, it's like, become really deep in at least one thing in your career early on, and then it will help you branch out later in life.
Or it will help you to draw architecture diagrams and structuring your business like an architecture diagram.
Or it'll help you draw in the behind the scenes, right? Very elegant, architecture and object-oriented ways of thinking, and then not showing those to people.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, there's nothing bad about showing it to people, though. It's just you do need to tell the story. Story still needs to be done.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. This is great insight. Awesome. So I'm glad that we took it home here. So Ruben, I would say I'll transfer it to you to close it up.
All right. So thank you, Kevin, once again for the time. This was definitely a very joyful conversation. As Alex said, we would love to have you back once again in some future. But for now, I just want to thank everybody for watching, and get tuned for next episode coming soon. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Did you enjoy this video? Then hit the like button and share it with your network. Also be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.